It was such a cold morning, it felt like the world itself had stopped breathing. Those who woke that winter saw frost drawing crystal lace on the window panes, so thick the valley outside was barely visible. The silence was absolute, a silence that only snow brings, wrapping everything in a heavy blanket that muffles even the sound of your own thoughts. People pulled worn duvets up to their chins, but the cold crept into the corners of the rooms, climbed up the floorboards, biting their toes even under 3 pairs of woolen socks knitted by candlelight. That was the coldest winter Ireland had ever known. Even now, so many years later, those who lived through it can still feel that burning chill in their bones, that feeling that it would never be warm again. But they also remember the heat of the peat burning in the fireplaces, the smoky smell rising up creaking wooden stairs, calling families to gather around the fire. Because that's where life happened in those days. It was there people warmed themselves, not just their bodies, but their souls. Getting out of bed on those mornings was like plunging into an icy lake. The air cut at exposed skin, and children dressed hurriedly, layering clothes that never seemed to be enough. The mothers were already up, always the first to brave the early chill, stoking embers they'd carefully saved from the night before, feeding the fire with pieces of dark peat that glowed red at the edges. The smell of that smoke was the perfume of old Ireland, a deep, earthy aroma that clung to clothes, hair, and every corner of the stone houses. It was the smell of survival, of continuity, of the promise that even in the cruelest winter, there would be warmth if you worked to keep it alive. Kettles steamed on hooks over the flames, and women poured boiling water over tea leaves, used for the 3rd or 4th time because nothing could be wasted. Everything had to last. Outside, the world was a painting in shades of gray and white. Snow covered the fields as far as the eye could see, turning stone walls into smooth, undulating lines and hiding paths everyone knew by heart. The bare trees stood like black skeletons against the heavy sky, their brittle branches bent under the weight of ice. When the wind blew, and it always blew on those days, it brought a cold that seeped into you, making your teeth ache and turning each breath into a cloud of vapor that froze on your eyelashes. But even with all that harshness, there was a strange beauty in that winter. It was as if the earth itself was sleeping under a white sheet, resting, saving its strength for the spring that felt like it would never arrive. People walked for miles, their worn leather boots soaking through the snow, turning each step into a small icy agony. They went to gather firewood, or deliver a message to a neighboring farm, or simply because they had to. Life in rural Ireland didn't stop for the weather. The roads were deserted, shrouded in a thick fog that swallowed everything, making familiar places seem strange and distant. The only sounds were the crunch of snow underfoot and the sharp whistle of wind through the stone walls. Sometimes someone would stop in the middle of the road, just to feel that immense silence, that solitude that wasn't really solitude because the whole earth was there, breathing slowly, waiting. And when you finally saw smoke rising from a chimney in the distance, your heart would leap. It meant people, it meant life, it meant you weren't alone in that frozen world. When people returned home, mothers would take off their children's boots and place them near the fire to dry. The children would huddle as close as they could to the flames, feeling that pleasant ache of warmth returning to numb fingers. Fathers would come in, shaking snow from black coats they'd worn for decades. Their shoulders hunched not just from years, but from the weight of that endless winter. They didn't talk much, they never had, but there was a silent understanding between them. They knew they were going through something together, that this winter was testing them, and the only way to survive was to stay together, keep the fire burning, and share what little they had. The nights were long. Families sat around the fireplace while women mended clothes in the flickering light. Men smoked their pipes in. Silence, and children simply existed there, feeling the heat on their backs and the cold on their fronts because the heat from the peat never reached far in those old drafty rooms. There was a simplicity in those days that's almost impossible to comprehend now. People had nothing beyond the essentials, and even those were scarce. But they had something more, something lost with time. Perhaps it was the feeling of belonging completely to that place, to that cold, harsh land that gave so little but was theirs. Perhaps it was the certainty that no matter how cold it got outside, There would always be a door to open, a fire to warm you, and familiar faces that understood without needing words. Neighbors would show up, knocking on the door with their knuckles because their hands were busy bringing bread or eggs or simply their presence. They'd stay for a few hours, drinking weak tea and talking about the weather, always the weather, as if talking about it could somehow make it less severe. There has never been a cold like that again. Today's winters are different, milder perhaps, or maybe we are different, more protected by comforts that didn't exist then. But that winter, that terrible and beautiful winter, remained etched in the memory of Ireland like the ice laces on the windows. And when the cold arrives now, so many years later, those who lived through it feel not fear but a strange longing, a desire to return to those hard times when everything was simpler, when the warmth of a fireplace was enough, when being together was all you needed to get through the darkness. Those winters were cruel, it's true, but they taught things that comfort never could. And their memories, both icy and warm at the same time, continue to warm hearts to this day, like embers kept burning that never completely go out. Thank you for joining me on this journey back in time. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share your own family memories in the comments below. See you next time.